Horizon from CDX, and this is Ukraine occupies Kursk Oblast. What's next? Bajal TLDR News EU or something? Okay, what the oh, how tables have turned. Who would have thought this coming, right? First of all, the whole scenario has been insane from the day one. Everything that is happening, like, oh, sure, Russia's not going to do that. Wait a minute, Russia did do that. Like, oh, this is going to be a problem. Now, wait a minute, like, people are helping. Oh, wait a minute, Russia is not as powerful as it seems, or at least not ready as it seems. Russia might be powerful, but it's like, felt like they just like jumped the gun because their readiness wasn't that great. And now Ukraine is actually occupying Russia. That is some insane shit, right? I don't know what to think of this. It's so good, right? Like the table have turned. I remember like watching some news feed as soon as I woke up like a day or so ago. And there was like an emergency clip that was like going too viral. But Russia, you know, like Putin suddenly called for like cabinet meeting or whatever. And the quote was, Ukraine is like attacking indiscriminately. Basically how you did when you started the special military operation. How can you even complain about that? How can you attack a country for 2 years, then when they attack you, you complain? That doesn't even make sense to me. But okay, I guess they're trying to play a righteous card or something, like our thing was righteous, there isn't, or something. Like even then, like what, they're not supposed to defend? And if you're going to invade them, they're going to invade you if they can, which apparently they can, apparently. But I didn't know Ukraine had that many resources. They had resources. People are sending them resources. I didn't know they had that many manpower to even do that. That is some next level shit. Of all the data I've seen of the warfare, I always had this assumption like Ukraine barely have enough manpower to defend their own thing. So this makes me think that they're like taking a gamble by doing this, because if like Russia suddenly attacks Ukraine now again, next wave, Ukraine might be like underpowered or something, like undermanned at least, right? When resources like Europe, USA sends resources is going to be fine. But manpower, that's where the issue lies. I don't know. But it's going to be interesting video. Let's watch it.
While it's hard to know exactly what's going on thanks to the fog of war, as of Thursday morning, it looks like Ukraine has captured a significant amount of Russian territory, and this is a far more substantial raid than the ones we saw into Belgorod last year. So in this video, we're going to have a look at what's happening in Kursk, Ukraine's possible motivations, and why, even if it's apparently been a success so far, at least at the time of writing, it's still a risky move.
Motivation, I mean, by his main motivation, but I guess like game plan is what he means, like what are they going to achieve by doing this? Like there's a risk, I guessing.
Move, especially given how things are progressing in the east. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So let's start with a bit of context. Since Putin's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Ukrainian forces, or at least forces aligned with Ukraine, have been staging occasional incursions into Russia. While there were a handful of smaller incursions in 2022, the first large-scale incursion happened in May 2023, when two groups called the Russian Volunteer Corps and the Freedom of Russian Legion attacked a border post on the Belgorod-Ukraine border. For context, the Russian Volunteer Corps is a far-right Russian nationalist paramilitary unit with a slightly confused ideology. According to their founder, they don't like Zelensky because he's not an ethnic Russian, but they think Putin's worse because he's apparently turning Russia into a multicultural police state.
Yeah, when you just said far right, like you don't need to explain more. Shit like this happen on the entire planet, right? Even in the USA, when like far right talk about things, they're like, I'd rather be Russian than support liberals. Like, fuck it, be traitor rather than support liberals. It's like, do you understand what you're saying, right? It's like, I hate Zelensky because he's not Russian as Russian, but I'm going to attack Russia because even Putin is not proper Russian. And I guess, do you see a step back and look at what you're doing? Does that align with what you're trying to do? That's okay, but I guess they are the one involved. That's some next level shit, man.
The Freedom of Russia Legion, first formed in March 2022, is a unit consisting of Russian defectors and other Russian volunteers who oppose Putin's regime for other, more normal reasons. While both groups are aligned with Ukraine and have fought alongside the Ukrainian army has said that both groups are independent. While Ukraine denied having anything to do with the attack, it's hard to imagine it going ahead without sign-off from Kyiv, and senior Ukrainian figures like spy chief Kyrylo Budanov strongly implied that Ukraine had ordered the attack. Nonetheless, because they weren't...
Obviously, why is Ukraine denying that? Like, isn't Ukraine is like justified position? Like, we signed off and fuck you, you invaded us, of course we're gonna invade you. Like, you're already at war, what's gonna happen? Why are people like finding political ways to say, oh, we are not involved?
Formerly part of the Ukrainian army, this gave Kyiv a degree of plausible deniability, which both made it harder for Russia to justify a retaliatory escalation and calmed nerves in Washington, where the Biden...
Russia already invaded you. They're gonna do that when they think they can. It's still ongoing war. I get it, like escalation, they can like tell US and things, oh, we're not escalating, but like nobody's gonna like, Russia is not backing off. Special military operations are still ongoing, and if like Zelensky can argue like if I do this, at least it creates pressure and maybe somebody will come to the table to negotiate terms or like de-escalate things. It's like some best defense is sometimes offense type of way. He can actually argue that.
Administration had long worried that attacks inside Russia might trigger a wider escalation. Anyway, the two groups advanced into Belgorod a bit, but were forced back in a couple of days. There was then another incursion in early June, where the two groups reached the town of Shebekino with the help of a third group, the Belarusian Volunteer Terror Battalion, but they were quickly repelled again. At the time, it was widely believed that these attacks were being directed by Kyiv in order to put political pressure on Putin to wind down the war or accept a peace deal. These were accompanied by
Is that a scene from post-apocalyptic show or a game like Metro? No, that's real life. That was a haunting photo right there. Far as your eye can see, everything destroyed. How does that even make sense? All this shit is happening. See, that's the thing. Even if we have like too much media right now, too much social media, we don't know anything. Isn't it weird? Right? When the war happens, people don't realize a lot of things, even with the internet age. Right? You think that you would have like every minute update or something. At start, at least, it was like that. When missiles were hitting like Kyiv and things like that, people were like sending footage and things. But nowadays, a lot of things happen, a lot of destruction happen. A lot of people like, get screwed up, right? And people usually don't know until like newspaper or some news thing comes out. So basically, when you need your media to like show the world what is happening, it's not happening, which is kind of fucked up.
Frequent drone and missile strikes into Russian territories bordering Ukraine, presumably for the same reason. Anyway, this is why, when there were a handful of reports about a Ukrainian incursion into Kursk Oblast earlier this week, most people thought it would be fundamentally similar to the incursions into Belgorod, a short-lived escapade intended to spook Russian citizens and put internal pressure on the Kremlin to end the war. However, we're now a few days in, and it looks to be a significantly more substantial event. Before we get into it though, a quick caveat. Presumably to maintain a degree of plausible deniability and discourage retaliation from the Kremlin, Ukraine has been pretty silent about what's happening in Kursk, which means we sort of have to rely on comments made by the Kremlin and Russian military bloggers, so take everything here with a pinch of salt. Nonetheless, what seems to have happened is that, on Tuesday morning, something like 1,000 Ukrainian or pro-Ukrainian troops launched an assault on Kursk, with the support of Ukrainian artillery and Ukraine's new F-16s. The contingent essentially moved northeast from Sumy towards...
The fuck? This is comical. How do you give F-16 and Leopard tanks support and at the same time say, oh, we are not involved? I think you're pretty involved. This is one of those instances where like, yeah, we did this, what? You attacked us, you invaded for 2 years. You've been attacking us like our cities look like shit now. So we invaded you, just return answer, right type of way. Like, I don't get this, this deniability, I don't understand that, right?
It's the Russian town of Sudza. The size of the force, plus the fact it was supported by tanks and F-16s, suggests that Ukraine is using conventional Ukrainian troops, not just pro-Ukrainian Russians. The Ukrainians were easily able to overwhelm the thin line of defensive troops Russia had along the border, and have now advanced up to 10 kilometers into Kursk, seizing a total of nearly 50 square kilometers, including the western part of Sudza. There are broadly two ways of reading.
Yeah, I like basically they got F-16s very recently and just like put it to use already. This is what they need F-16 for, right? smaller things can be too overwhelming, right? Too many, like, like legendary people have said, like a properly trained and powerhouse of a like fighter jet team is too overpowering thing. This is what they mean. F-16s are good if there is no anti-defense thing in that level, in that place, but F-16s are really good, right? And those F-16s can really be just like deciding factor if trying to do some ridiculous shit like this. So I guess Ukraine was kind of looking for this. As soon as we got enough equipment that makes us a bit edge out in technology, just a bit, we're gonna attack and try to take Russian oblasts, basically states and things, right? That's what called oblast, Russian places, to put pressure there, which is basically what they're doing right now.
The first is that this is basically an expanded version of the raids we saw in Belgorod. Ukraine has no intention of permanently holding territory here, and this is again about putting political pressure on Putin while simultaneously forcing Russia to redirect forces from the Eastern Front, even if Ukraine also has to do the same. If this is the case, it looks like Ukraine has been broadly successful. In a televised address on Tuesday evening, Putin looked visibly flustered.
Генеральным штабом ФСБ, имею в виду пограничное направление деятельности Федеральной службы безопасности, и заслушаю очередной доклад коллег по тому, что происходит в Курской области.
Russia has had to deploy more troops to the area, although it's not clear if they're going to have to shift troops from the front lines or if local troops will be sufficient. The second interpretation is that Ukraine wants to permanently hold on to Russian land in Kursk. This would be ambitious, especially given the lack of defensive fortifications, the fact that Ukraine can't rotate out troops here, and the fact that Ukraine wouldn't be able to use HIMARS to hit Russian troop concentrations, thanks to American restrictions. But if Ukraine can do this without expending too many troops, which are desperately needed on the front lines in the east, this would be a massive win, for a couple of reasons. First, it suggests that Putin's threats of escalation are fundamentally empty. Even though Ukraine has occupied Russian territory and is now flying Western-delivered F-16s over Russian land, Putin hasn't escalated, at least not yet.
When it comes to Putin, I don't know what to think, man, right? It's very confusing, like, does he have a larger plan? Or everything that is happening was a too much surprise for him, so he doesn't know what's going to happen in the future. Even he doesn't know, like he's winging it. Because I do believe that he probably didn't realize like Ukraine's going to fight back the way it did. He probably thought it's going to be like German style, blitzkrieg type of mentality. They're just going to like, waltz passing Ukraine just like in 2012. The entire country of Ukraine will fall or something very quickly. It didn't happen. And I don't know if he relied on that too much and now he's just like, I don't know what to do type of way. Or he kind of see that coming and just like slowly building toward that slow warfare. I don't know what's happening, right? Or I think it's the middle of both things, right? He didn't see that coming, but now he's like being like wartime economy type of mentality, long haul war. But he still doesn't realize like how ambitious Ukraine can be at like taking over an entire oblast in Russia and things like that. He's getting surprised left and right, which you can see when he talks, right? Every time he gives like the talk. So I don't know. This is a like you don't know where this is going, right? In both sides. It's like very willy-nilly type of situation in both sides. What's gonna happen? Like people can't calculate each other, right? There is no grinder strategy because you can't create a grinder strategy if you constantly surprise like that, right? I don't know.
Might try to use this to convince its Western backers that they should let the Ukrainians strike targets deep inside Russia, because the risk of escalation is actually minimal. Second, if Ukraine can hold on to Russian territory, it would seriously complicate any attempts by Russia to freeze the conflict along the current lines of control, which is something they've allegedly been pushing for in negotiations recently. If this were to happen, Ukraine could even offer Kursk back to the Russians in exchange for at least some of its own territory. Nonetheless, this still looks deeply risky. Holding territory in Kursk will almost definitely require constant infusion of resources, which Ukraine would otherwise be deploying to the front lines in Donbass or Kharkiv. If this redirection of forces either leads to a Russian breakthrough in the east or ends up being decimated by the Russian response, it'll end up looking like a massive strategic blunder that Ukraine can hardly afford.
Yeah, I think what Russia needs right now, like I said, Putin, when it comes to Putin, I think it's both ways. I think he's getting surprised a lot than he will think, but he's also has some kind of a strategy. He thought that he's going to win, but he didn't win instantly. So now he's going to wartime economy type of mentality and like conscripting a lot of people. So what would help Russia right now is time, right? So if he agrees to ceasefire this and that and just like agree to a lot of things, to me, it's just a delay, just enough of delay so Russia can really tune out all its weak points, creates a lot of like ammunition, artilleries, and be at that point when it comes to like production of these things, like wartime economy. That's what it means. Production of things becomes really higher. Like you conscript a lot of people now, like they gain experience, and then they like overwhelm Ukraine in the end, right? Because they can agree to ceasefire right now, but I don't think that's going to last for long. All Putin would do is like bide for time before he's really ready. And that makes me think, like, why didn't you do that before invading Ukraine? Why didn't you, like, I guess that's enough of a change. The world would see that coming. And just like how Sweden joined NATO, Ukraine would certainly like apply for and like join NATO, then it would become really harder. So I don't know. Before I was thinking like Putin just half-assed the war, right, without even thinking. But then again, maybe not. Maybe he knew this. Maybe he knew like changing a lot of things would give out clear indication that Russia is going to do this, and like Ukraine might join NATO faster, just like Sweden did and things like that, right? So he just like launched first. And then like slowly now it's like building up or something. I don't know. These are my guesses.
This point in the war. Keep diving deeper into this and other news stories over on Nebula, where the TLDR team curates the most important news videos from around the world, saving you from a deluge of bad news and helping you.
Yeah, well, that's it. This was a very short and informative video. Go to go.nebula.tv/TLDR News EU and support this channel, or go to original video page link. Yeah, this was really interesting video. I didn't know about that pro-Russian groups that is with Ukraine, but kind of makes sense. Far right, so again that makes sense, and the other group definitely makes sense. Defectors, people like probably Russians who also has like Russian relatives in Ukraine who doesn't agree with it, basically people like that. So that group definitely makes sense. So yeah, I really need to watch a detail if it exists in the YouTube statistical video, like how many really like ground, how many troops Ukraine have, how many troops Russia has, and reserve and conscripts that they are getting. Like what is the disparity there? Who has how many troops? Where the resources are? I really need to understand that landscape, because in my head, like Russia kind of edges out when it comes to like manpower and things. Resources, I don't know. Again, Russia can just like build up things by putting factories everywhere. Russia is fighting its border, so it's not that hard, right? While Ukraine is getting resources from all around the planet, I guess. So I don't know. Right, well, if you like my next one, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.